I have a difficulty. I'm sure it's not unique to me. And at the outset, I will indicate that I know the tremendous work that the secretary to the committee, the clerk to the committee has to do in the preparation of the minutes. You know, it's a long meeting, long minutes. But it's a little difficult for us to get the minutes on the morning and to read them and to come here with some amount of dispatch to deal with the reading of the minutes and to confirm it. I don't know what solution we may have to this particular problem, but I'm here appealing to your good office to ask the clerk of the House to ensure that the clerk to this committee gets assistance so that she may be able to, in a timely manner, to present the minutes to the members so we can read it in time in preparation for coming to this meeting.
All right, thank you, Member Guy. I mean, I actually think it's remarkable that the clerk is able to generate these minutes within a week because they're remarkably accurate and extensive.
Well, Chairman, if they are
the problem is
accurate,
that we
can just move on block for them to be.
Well, I have read them, I must confess, but I'm now accustomed to getting them at approximately 9:10 on the morning of the meeting, for which I block 20 minutes to go through them. And I can assure you that they're in good nick. But I do accept the point that it's less than ideal. And one alternative would be that we don't take the minutes this morning, but we defer them until the following week. The problem with that is that there are matters arising in them which are of use to us today. So the only alternative would be, if it's possible, to get them like the night before. Yes. So you need help with this, or for this? Should I ask the clerk to give you some help? Or? Yeah. There is no help to be had, is what I'm told, you know. And the clerk is involved with 5 committees. So she has a lot on her plate. But she says she will try to get them to us even the night before.
But Chairman,
yeah.
I am not beating up on the clerk. What I think should happen, if the committees of this House are to function properly, then the resources have to be put in place. And I think that as a resolution coming from this PAC, we should mandate the clerk of the House of the Parliament to ensure that adequate staffing is in place so that the business of the House can take place in a timely manner. It cannot be that one clerk is assigned to 5 committees and that we are expected, if we meet on a weekly basis, as is the plan, that we are encumbered by the fact that the minutes are late.
Yeah.
So I think as a committee we should move that particular resolution, proposal, whatever, because we need to have the business of the House moving in a timely manner. Yeah. Simple.
Well, members, does anyone object to the idea of us indicating to the clerk of the Parliament, clerk to the Houses, that we would like to see if some additional resources could be provided to the PAC committee clerk to enable her to generate the minutes in time? Mm-hmm.
The member's argument here requires additional expenses. Okay? We came to the House Finance Committee, the estimates of expenditures were approved. There's a certain amount that was allocated to each department and agency. It's not within our power to talk about expenses from any government agency and department. The purpose of the committee is to review, not to put restriction in the agency and ask for expenses. That's out of our power entirely, out of our domain. We can't go down the road. And whatever is being used by the clerk, those are the funds approved by Parliament. Any additional funds will have to come from the supplementary estimate. But we can't impose any additional expenses on any agency. That's not within the remit of any committee.
Chairman, there's a thing known as efficiency. And efficiency sometimes doesn't necessarily mean that you need more funds to do a particular thing. Reallocation of resources right? Ensure that the particular area is being staffed and properly manned. It doesn't always call for more resources and more funding resources to get things at a better place.
That point is taken. So is Member Warmington's point taken as well. So the question really is, can anything be done within the existing footprint of your budgetary allocation here in Parliament to give the clerk to this committee some more assistance in the generation of the minutes, given that we've been meeting every week? And really all we're asking is that we get the minutes, you know, ideally 24 hours in advance of the meeting, if possible. If not, then at least 12. And that would be helpful. If not, then maybe we could put in a request for consideration to be given in the supplementary budget to some additional resources for Parliament to enable these committees to function as they should, given how important the work is. Sorry, so that was page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. On page 14, I have one query, which is in the first large paragraph, about, I think it's 7 lines down, where it says derated. This was a discussion in which Mr. Watson was saying that over the years, Petrojam has been unable to access the type of crude for which it was originally designed. The refinery was originally designed, and the refinery was derated to approximately 32,000 barrels per day. That derating, how is that spelled? D-E, yeah, yes, and it's not a capital D, it's just a D-E hyphen, yeah. 15. Well, would anyone care to move for the adoption of the minutes? Thank you, Member Warmington, seconded by Member Clark, subject to that one minor edit. Very well. All right. In terms of issues arising from the minutes, there is tabled today a letter from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology to the Public Accounts Committee of yesterday's date. It's a cover letter forwarding to us a letter of June 14th from Mr. Watson, the General Manager of Petrojam. And that letter is, it's 4 pages long, and then attached to it are various things, supporting documents. The supporting documents include I think basically shipping related information, and this responds, I think, to Member Dunn's request, as I recall, to see examples of 2 or 3 shipments and in fact that's addressed on page 4 of Mr. Watson's letter, that aspect of it, which I'll just quickly read. The question was also raised as to how Petrojam was able to accurately verify the quantity of oil that it received and paid for, and verify the measurement quoted by the independent inspector were accurate. Petrojam was asked to submit the documentation relating to at least 2 or 3 shipments that showed the quantities for the products at the point when the ships left the suppliers and the quantities received in Jamaica by Petrojam. And there are 3 pairs of load port and disport inspection reports. Disport is what? Discharge port inspection reports. There's one for Molo crude oil, reports for Molo crude oil of December 25th and January 1st to 3rd, 2018-2019. And then the reports for unleaded gasoline, 87 OI and 90 OI, dated June 15, 16, and June 19, 2018. And then there's a report for gas oil, 0.5% sulfur, and jet fuel, dated May 22nd, 2013, and May 23rd, 2013. So we have 3 different sets of examples of that for members if they want to have a look at it. And Mr. Dunn, you might be particularly interested in that because I think you were the one who had made that request. Yeah, so if there's anything you want to raise on it, please let me know and we can discuss it. The other issues that were covered in the letter from Mr. Watson, he had provided a breakdown of the product-specific losses from the KILR and which is a Kingston industrial loading rack, and he has the losses from that over the period from 2013 to 2018 across several different product lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different product lines, and that so the first table on page really 1 of the letter sets out the losses, and those numbers are in barrels. Is that what that is? Yeah. And then in the second table on page 2, there are 2 tables. The upper one is the volume of sales over that period, but of the same product, so you can compare the losses against the sales.
That's correct.
And the sales there is expressed in volume, right? Yeah, not money, but volume.
Volume, that's
Yeah.
correct.
And then there's a third table of the same data again with the losses expressed as a percentage for each one.
That's
okay.
correct.
So I suppose what is noticeable in this is, well, one of the things that is noticeable is that there was a very sharp increase in the percentage of 87R losses in 2017-18 relative to the trend of the prior 4 years, because it was 0.34 in 13-14, 0.34 14-15, then it went to 0.4 15-16, 0.43 16-17, and then 0.7 in 17-18. So that definitely is an outlier there. Any comment on that, Mr. Watson, as to what may have
The
been
primary explanation, Chairman, morning everyone, is that there was an issue with that gasoline tank number 10, and I believe, if I'm correct, that was the area. So the measurements were not able to take very accurate measurements at that tank. So that tank will be coming out of service this year, within a couple of months.
Then the second issue covered, which is on page 3 of his letter, and is in respect of oil or losses due to fugitive leaks, which is pump seals. Mr. Morgan had indicated that no estimates were provided for 2014 through 2017 because the figures were not material. Members were, however, of the view that the estimates to be provided for those years to enable them to see whether there had been a decline or increase in the estimated figure for those periods. And then the response to that is the figure of 1,415 barrels was reported for fugitive emissions. What are we calling fugitive emissions? Just what is that? Just leaks at the seals. Okay. Just leaks through a defective seal.
Yes, that's correct.
It's an odd description.
Chairman,
Yes.
these are all estimates.
Right.
Do we know way of quantifying these leaks? I mean, I don't ask rocket science to find out how much escapes through a particular thing. Is there something that we could invest in to find out that? But just to say estimates all along, it's like I know, but just out of curiosity, because when you look at 2017-18, even though you have redefined it.
The 17-18 figures are redefined.
No, I understand that,
Okay.
Mr. Watson.
Right.
It would be good, because you see, look at it, Chairman.
Yeah.
After you did this extensive maintenance work was done, and you reduced it in 1 year, right, and to 132 per quarter, you have settled on that to take you from that quarter to the other 3 quarters of that year, to the 4 quarters of the next year, to the 4 quarters of the following year, ad infinitum. So I just want to know if we have some way of determining this accurately, or are we still running with the estimates? And what would be good too is, oh, well, it wouldn't be good because I'm sure 17-18, if it wasn't redefined, would be 528 same way.
Yeah. So Mr. Watson, you can address that. I just want to understand what you're saying here is that the figures for 2014 through 2017, which were not in the original document that was tabled last week, where there were those blanks. So what you're saying was that those numbers were actually put under another category, other process losses. So they were accounted for somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
So you've removed them from there and put them here now to present them to us. And then you've said that in the 2017-18 number, there's been a redefinition of the term fugitive losses to include losses from vents, valves, flanges, crude tank seals, etc. Just explain that to me. What was it prior to this redefinition? What was fugitive losses deemed to be?
So, but let me see if I can answer Dr. Guy as well. If you think about it, you have a pump pumping fuel, and you may see fumes are spraying from the seal. It's difficult for you to measure something like that because it's intermittent, and the intention really is not to have it. So it's if you think about it, it's quite a tedious task to undertake. So when we had it initially, and they came up with that estimate in 13-14, I think, then we did some extensive work going through checking all the seals, repairing them, and that's what brought the number down. And the last year. I think they added we added some additional areas like the evaporation and all that, and venting, and that's what moved the numbers up. So the intention really at all times is if you can measure, you will measure, but it's to try and fix things like seal leaks and venting leaks. So if you have a tank, for instance, that is leaking from the seal, you try and fix the seal more than anything else.
If I may, do you have a system now where you're regularly checking these things to make sure that whatever was happening before to cause that leakage, that is monitored on a consistent basis so this doesn't happen, so it's not ongoing? Is there something in place now?
But isn't that just a maintenance issue?
So that's what on a consistent basis, you have technicians in the tank field, they're walking around, they're checking pumps, they're checking pipes.
But clearly that was not happening before.
I think it did happen before. Maybe we were not as vigilant.
Vigilant, okay.
But certainly we're putting a lot more emphasis on it.
So we can move on.
Mr. Chairman.
You wanted to ask something, so on?
Yes, I do. We came here and we asked the representative from the ministry and from Petrojam and PCJ to come here. Is to deal with the concerns expressed by the Auditor General's department. And we come back week after week asking for other documents that have no relevance with this. We deviate every week we discuss some other issue, delve into other issue that has nothing to do with this. What I want to know, is there any end in sight for this committee as it relates to these representatives? Because most taking into consideration now, the Ministry of Science, Energy, Technology, Petroleum,
the short answer is yes.
PBCJ,
we will soon be wrapping up. But this is not irrelevant because this came out of the oil losses discussion in the report.
They have abandoned the work. You can say those departments have been abandoned because they have to come every week and sit here. And not only on a Tuesday, they have to be researching, and every week you have all these things that the PS have to send on all these big documents. And we're not getting in the way. A lot of the questions we're asking are going irrelevant to what we came here for. Is there any end in sight? I'm asking.
Yes, there's end
Very shortly?
Yes, there's end in sight.
Very shortly?
There's end in sight, hopefully shortly.
Very shortly?
And the point you've made about this is irrelevant is not correct. It is not irrelevant. The issue of oil losses, accounted for and unaccounted for losses, was a big issue raised in the report. And in the discussion of that issue last week, some things were raised and further information has been provided.
Can we finish with this then?
We will be going to this shortly. If you stop interrupting the process, we can move on.
No.
But there's one more point I just wanted to ask Member Dunn. Is the material that you received, if there's anything you wanted to ask in relation to those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'd asked specifically about LPG, but I noticed that the information that was provided is oil.
The request we got did not specify LPG. We got a letter asking us to provide the information. It didn't specify LPG.
Because Chairman, remember I was questioning the fact about this meter and what we receive versus what we paid for. So my question was related to the LPG, not oil in general.
Well, Mr. Watson,
we have the LPG information, but it was not specified, so we just gave you 3 samples.
In light of Mr. Warmington's concern about pressuring you with too much requests for information, I don't know, Member Dunn, you want to ask for that to be provided still? The comparisons from the shipped and discharged amounts of LPG?
My only concern is, Chairman, I just need to know that we're getting value for money, that whatever we are paying for is what we have received. And therefore, if to satisfy that the information is provided, then I'm happy to take the information.
Yes, so you can. I mean, when one knows that in relation to MPG, sometimes the variances are actually positive. Yes, which, in other words, sometimes they actually end up receiving more than was measured based on their sales. So it's
That's no solace, sir.
Yeah. All right, so that, I think, addresses the issues that came out of this document tabled this morning.
Morning,
we can go back
Chairman.
to the... Yes, ma'am, please.
I am now in possession of the specific information that Dr. Dunn, Member Dunn asked for. That was just supplied to me because it was not in the letter. So if it is specifically required, then we can provide the information.
Sure, Member Dunn would be pleased to get it, so thank you very much. One question I had for you, Mr. Watson, and PS. In the discussion last week and in the minutes, there was some commentary around the prospects for Petrojam, given that you will be the heavy fuel oil sales that you have to JPS, which were like 70% of the heavy fuel oil was sold to JPS, and their rapid transitioning to a LNG-based fuel supply. That was one of the issues, and then the whole question of trying to grow your asphalt sales, and the VDU being an important technology that one would need to acquire to really ramp up that, and also trying to get into low sulfur imports of crude that you can then service the bunker market, which is moving into a low sulfur environment because of the international rules that are coming on stream. All of that was discussed last week. And in that context, we know, PS, that the acquisition of Petrojam shares, the 49% under the statute, has been implemented, and there's been some news around that. I was just wondering if you could give us an update as to whether or not the pricing for those shares or the value that is to be ascribed to them and the money to be paid into escrow pursuant to the act that was passed earlier this year, whether that has been determined and has that payment into escrow been made?
The short answer to your question is yes, sir. The funds were estimated, as was made public. I think it's $49 million, if my memory serves me correctly, and it was paid over to escrow until such time as it can be paid over to Venezuela.
So the figure that was paid in was roughly 49 million US dollars.
That's what I'm recalling right now.
Okay.
If I'm wrong,
yes,
I will,
you can correct
address that.
Thank you. Okay, members, we can go back to the prompt. I think we are at issue 10, I think, is that right? Yes, issue 10, which is on page 19 of the prompt. And I'll just read it. It says, against the background of declining sales, Petrojam's most liquid assets, cash and cash equivalents, covered only an average of 17% of current liabilities over the 5-year period. Hence, in an effort to support working capital, Petrojam borrowed $35 million US from the Petrocarib Development Fund in 2014-15, augmented by a bank overdraft facility of 101.5 million Jamaican dollars. Further, in financial year 2015-16, Petrojam converted dividends previously declared to PCJ, its majority shareholder, converted those dividends to a loan, as it did not have adequate cash to meet this obligation. So this is really a commentary on the liquidity and working capital position of Petrojam, which has been obviously stressed insofar as dividends declared haven't been paid in cash but converted to loans and so on. Management's response. Petrojam's liquidity was affected by several factors, including amounts outstanding from external entities. In other words, you had receivables that were not being paid, and that was affecting your liquidity. However, the Ministry of Finance has made concerted efforts in supporting Petrojam to bring the government of Jamaica related accounts receivable balances to improve levels, and there's an update provided here. The JDF account is currently serviced monthly, and past due balances now average 22% versus 93% and 82% at the close of 2014-15 and 2015-16 respectively. JPS account is expected to normalize by the end of financial year 18-19 amidst the Ministry of Finance pronouncement to address their own arrears with the power company. And the Ministry of Finance has been meeting the annual obligations under the PETCOM term loan arrangement, which will expire in 2020. Just on the PETCOM term loan arrangement, PETCOM has been divested, all right? That's my recollection of it. What is the PETCOM term loan arrangement that's referred to here, Dean?
It had to do with JUTC. Can you remember? I'll ask our CFO
yes, please.
To explain.
Okay,
just,
good morning.
State your name for the record.
Okay, I'm Carlene Evans, the acting CFO. So morning, Chairman, again, members. So the JUTC PETCOM arrangement, so that was divested, as you correctly stated. So PETCOM at the time had a trade receivable with Petrojam, and included in that there was some debt owing by the JUTC, which represented taxes, SCT taxes, that were unpaid, about 1.3 billion. So that component of it was converted into a 3-year, into a term loan by the Ministry of Finance. So that is what is referenced here. So as we stated in our response, it is being serviced annually by the Ministry of Finance, and the last payment, about 400 million Jamaican dollars, is expected to be paid by the end of March 2020. So that would terminate that arrangement.
So this was taxes on fuel that were related to JUTC's purchases from Petcom originally,
That's correct.
and then that was assumed by the government, by the Ministry of Finance, and somehow ended up being a payment to Petrojam, because what, you acquired that receivable from Petcom, is that what happened?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. You want to discuss that? Yeah, on the JPS one. Yeah.
There was, outside of the SCT that is owed, was there any other from JUTC that was owed for fuel taken?
Well, we wouldn't have that information because the SCT obligation was between Petcom and JUTC.
Okay. Oh, and the petrol would have been what?
Petcom purchases from Petrojam.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. Thanks.
Somewhat triangular, because ultimately the taxes would be owing to the Ministry of Finance. So anyway, I'm sure the accounting is clear. So on the point about the JPS account, we know that was a very big item, and the minister had indicated a large payment that was made to JPS in respect of monies owing to them by the government in the last fiscal year. How has that impacted your cash position at Petrojam?
So, okay, just to clear the point that we made about the arrears, so at March 31st, 2019, whatever outstanding arrears that was on the fuel purchases, that was settled by the power company. But then at various points during the last 5 years, from time to time, there was arrears carrying on the account. So during 2014-15, we actually approached the Petrocarib, because no doubt that would have created some liquidity problem, cash flow problems on Petrojam's side. So a short-term arrangement was entered into with the Petrocarib, so that gave us some liquidity space while we manage the payment arrangement with the JPS Co.
I understand all that. So the funds that you received from JPS as a result of the government clearing or reducing substantially the amounts that the government owed JPS. JPS in turn owed you, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was, as at March 31st, there was an accumulated balance of that account. And that has been paid off?
That's correct.
And that cash came to you now, and what have you done with it? Did you have payables that you had to settle with that money as well?
Yes, that definitely did. So it actually came back in our whole working capital cash management cycle.
So the amounts that were borrowed from the Petrocarib Development Fund and the dividend that was capitalized into a loan and so on, are those still on your books?
Well, the dividend that was converted to a loan, so that is still on the books between ourselves and PCJ. So there's a formal term agreement with it, covering that arrangement, which is being serviced by Petrojam.
Yes, yes.
And it is maintained current, we're current.
Regarding the dividend that was converted to a loan, is that dividend to PCJ or dividend of all the shareholders in Petrojam?
It was to all the shareholders. So PDVSA at the time, as a shareholders, they received their payment in cash, whereas a portion that was due to PCJ, the equivalent portion, that was converted to a term loan.
Okay. No, they paid them back. They paid them. One other question. Really, Petcom arrangement. Petrojam still supplies directly to JUTC?
No, we don't.
You don't?
No.
They purchase otherwise?
That would appear so.
Thank you. So in terms of your current working capital position, we don't have, your audited financials are not yet available, or at least not published and so on. But how are you faring now in terms of your liquidity as a ratio of your current liabilities?
So in terms of the benchmark ratios, we are adequate in terms of the one-to-one liquidity benchmarks. We are maintaining those ratios. And I mean, our cash flow, that's an ongoing cycle. So we haven't reached out to any external lending institution, as we did with the Petrocaribe at the time, to get those supplements in our working capital in recent time.
Did you say that the Petrocaribe loan is still on the books, or it's finished?
No,
it's
that has been fully liquidated.
That's been paid. All right. Yes, sir.
Niggling concern, the JUTC Petcom Petrojam arrangement. JUTC is a state entity that is subsidized from the consolidated fund. Petcom at the time was another state entity when the arrangements were in place, before it was privatized. When the transition took place, meaning the privatization with Petcom, was it immediately that the JUTC purchases or supplies ceased?
Say that again?
No, what I'm curious about, the fact that JUTC stopped purchasing, they weren't purchasing directly from you anymore.
No, they didn't. As I said earlier, JUTC didn't purchase directly from Petrojam. So in terms of the history and the build-up of whatever arrears they would have had with Petcom, we wouldn't be aware of that or have privy to that information.
When exactly did just remind me, when the privatization took place at Petcom?
I understand it may be around June 2016, around that timeline.
Okay. And you don't know who JUTC is purchasing from?
No, we don't know, because there are several marketing companies, but definitely Petcom would have been a supplier.
All right. Okay. I just out of curiosity. They are in the business, then we'll know.
All right. But ultimately, the fundamentals of the business, which over time have led to this working capital challenge, which has been a long-term challenge, you've managed through the improved fiscal position of the government that some of those receivables have been settled and so on. But going forward, do you anticipate for the rest of this fiscal year, for example, you will be in a position to finance your own working capital through your revenues without the need for external financial support of any kind?
Okay, so we actually have a model that we use at Petrojam. So we do have some trade financing arrangements with a consortium of banks, 2 local banks and an overseas bank, where we have a pool of funds that we operate on a revolving basis. So we do 60 to 90 days refinancing as the need arises. But then in terms of a long-term or a term loan arrangement, we do not foresee that we would get into that sort of arrangement over the medium term as it relates to our working capital arrangements.
All right, any other questions for this item, or can we move to the next? All right, we'll move to issue 11. It reads, Petrojam experienced reduced efficiency in the utilization of its assets to generate sales. Although fixed assets increased to 165 million US in 2017-18 from 117.2 million US in 2013-14, Petrojam's total asset turnover ratio fell based on declining sales over the 5-year period. Total asset turnover ratio averaged 2.6 over the review period, given a reduction to 2.3 in 2017-18 from 2.9 in 2013-14. The fall in this ratio suggested reduced efficiency by Petrojam in the utilization of assets to generate sales, despite an increase in fixed assets. Madam Auditor General, perhaps you could just remind the committee what is the asset turnover ratio or total asset turnover ratio? If you could just remind us what that is.
Are you asking me for the formula or the specific ratio? If you turn to the back, right, page 111. You'll see the ratios outlined there.
Is this included in this?
Yes, the total assets.
Yes. Where
it's not there.
Total assets divided by revenues. Okay. How do you measure it? Over what period?
Okay, it was measured over 5 years, and what you're really doing is looking to see how Petrojam utilizes its assets when it adds new assets, and those assets would actually include like inventory, cash deposits. So it's a combination. You can find on page 97, footnote 83, which would explain the assets that we would have included at the footnote for the assets.
So that's really all assets, fixed assets and financial assets.
Right. So technically, the value that you would have in terms of your inventory, you would be calculating the value of the inventory for each year.
So you're looking at the average of your total assets over the year, opening and closing, and then and then your revenue as a ratio of that, to see how much revenue your assets are generating.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So the point here is that the ratio has been falling. So although the fixed assets themselves are increasing, the actual total asset turnover ratio has been falling. So anyway, the response to this from management is Petrojam's revenue is subject to volatilities in global oil prices. In periods of declining oil prices, the asset turnover ratio would not reflect a fair measure of asset utilization. In other words, because the price of your product is affected by market prices and those have been falling, then your revenue number in nominal terms falls with it. And so the ratio is necessarily going to go down over that period. So we can't really, unless you normalize this for that factor, you wouldn't really know to what extent it's really a decrease in the efficiency of the utilization of your assets, or it's just a function of the fall in the market value of your raw material.
It's really price driven, not efficiency. If you think about it, this is a very capital intensive business. And even when prices may be declining, you still will have to put in certain capital equipment to maintain your productivity. That's one. We did some research looking at this, and what we saw on a benchmark basis, the industry norm is between 2 and 3%. So that's not the number here is not an unusually low number. But typically, because we don't control those prices, we will still have to do a capital investment. The revenues can fall depending on what's happening in the marketplace. So your summation is quite correct.
So, Madam Auditor General or team, I don't know if you have any comment on that explanation. You know, in a sense, it's without some normalization for that factor, you don't really know to what extent it's really a declining efficiency in the utilization of assets as opposed to just the price effect of the main revenue and working capital expenses, cost of sales being going down with the market price. So.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Certainly this section forms a part, is the financial statements analysis. So it's really reporting the facts and what the ratios indicate, which it accords with what you have just said. It really reveals a reduced efficiency, not taking into consideration industry norms, but precisely what the ratio.
Just going off of the financials and saying this is what you see. Yes.
Exactly.
All right. All right. And the explanation has been given by Petrojam as to their view as to why that isn't that meaningful in this particular context. Okay. We will move to the next page of the prompt, which is actually the final page. Sorry. Oh.
I can speak for myself.
Yes, he has no impediment when it comes to that. All right, paragraph 718. PCJ awarded a contract to a local university under an internship program at a value of $119.6 million, in which the university was required to develop and administer the academic component of the program to participants over a 3-month period from May 2018 to 3 groups of 250 participants each, totaling 750 participants, and house the participants at its halls of residence during the period. However, only 562 participants, which is roughly 75%, were recruited, which equates to a value of $89.7 million under the contract. So the contract was for $119.6 million for 750 participants, but in fact only 562 participants were recruited, which would prorate to a value of $89.7 million under the contract. And this is paragraph 718 of the report, which is on page 89, members, of the Auditor General's report. I'll just read that paragraph in full because I think it is a little easier to follow the issue. PCJ embarked on a pre-university training course to include training in principles of engineering technology, renewable energy and energy efficiency, entrepreneurship and information technology, geared towards exposing participants to tertiary institution studies. PCJ awarded a contract to a local university under an internship program at a value of $119.6 million, in which the university was required to develop and administer the academic component of the program to participants over a 3-month period. And it was 3 groups of 250 participants each, totaling 750 participants, and housing the participants at the institution's halls of residence during that 3-month period, beginning in May last year. However, only 562, or 75% of the participants were recruited, which equates to a value of $89.7 million under the contract. As at the date of the Auditor General's report, PCJ paid $83.8 million, and a final invoice of $35.9 million was submitted by the university to PCJ on November 12, 2018, for payment. PCJ committed to pay this balance following verification and final report from the university to ensure the full closeout of the internship program. In the event that PCJ honors the claim without recruiting the remaining 188 participants to the internship program, it will not realize full value for money. The management response was that in reference to that PCJ internship program, the PCJ is now undertaking a thorough review of the initiative to assess its impact. As an update, 656 candidates, or 87% of the 750, which was the target, completed the program, as against the 562 in the report. So, okay. And the status verification column says, we received PCJ's internship program final report and noted that the report was updated, highlighting 656 individuals enrolled at the program. So, members, any comments on this?
This is an ongoing program?
We're looking to have it as an ongoing program.
Okay.
So we're looking to implement an evolved program in this year.
Okay. Or are the students selected?
We would use UTEC to select the students, and we're looking for students who have a high proficiency demonstrated over the years in their school, and then certainly the ones that would matriculate easiest into university.
So these are pre-university courses?
In essence, yes.
But you said UTEC would identify the students?
Right.
How do they, I want to get a sense of interested students or parents of students who are mindful of participating. How do they, one, become aware, and two, how do they access the training?
Well, I can ask Camille Taylor to use the update on that.
Yes, Ms. Taylor, please give us some color on this program.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, members. So the idea is that UTEC is in dialogue with the Ministry of Education to identify prospective CSEC and CAPE students. And they're also looking at students who have applied to their program, immediate high school leavers who have applied to their engineering degree programs.
Yeah, I'm still not.
The course is run in May, so it's what, towards the end of the academic year or before they start. If they have applied, this would be students who have not yet started their university program, but in the run-up to during the summer months. Is that the idea of it?
Well, the 2019 iteration, which is still under consideration and development, it would run in the summer, July and August.
Yeah, I'm still not clear. I hear you're saying, Madam, that UTEC works in tandem with the Ministry of Education. Is it in the recruitment, identification of these students or potential students? But how does a student or a parent of a student who would wish to participate in such a program, how do they, one, become aware, and two, how do they access this facility, though limited, that is available?
Okay, so member, I can certainly say we are awaiting approval for this year's program. Once we get that approval, there is a website that's going to be set up and telephone numbers that individuals can call. Certainly it should be on UTEC's social media pages, and the PCJ will also have it on our page.
That is for those to come.
Yeah,
but that will not be the first. We have had it before. Right. How was it that?
It was recruited previously.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, it was done largely through the Ministry of Energy and Science and Technology at the time. Through the minister's constituency. Ms. Taylor can certainly clarify.
So it was done through the, well, first I hear it was UTEC and the Ministry of Education. Now I'm hearing it is the Ministry of Energy.
No, member, we're talking about two different things. So for the 2018 iteration of the program,
yes,
that was done through the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. For the 2019, which is currently under consideration by our Board of Directors, that is going to be done by the University of Technology if it is approved for implementation.
Oh, so you are shifting from what you had to the
yes, we're evolving.
But the question is, last year's, as you said, the 2018 iteration took place from May for 3 months. We are in June now, so what is the consideration period for this year if you want to have a similar program? July 1?
It was mentioned, member, July and August, that's what we're looking at right
Sorry?
now. July and August, that's what we're looking at.
P.S., do you have any sense, this predated your advent in this ministry, but do you have any sense last year, 2018, how the selection of the 600 and plus participants was done by the ministry?
No, sir, I was not provided with that information, no.
Sorry.
Member Bunting, then you.
Can you say, PS, if an evaluation of the 2018 iteration was done that started off by saying, here were the original objectives, here is what we achieved, and an assessment done from a value for money perspective? I mean, 120 million for what is essentially sounds like a summer program is a lot of money, Mr. Chairman. And if we're not very clear of what is being delivered, the outcomes, then it could be, just another adventure of the PCJ Petrojam into the portfolios of the Social Development Commission, the Ministry of Education, etc. PS, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe since the Auditor General's report, or since the Petrojam issue has been topical in Parliament, a policy statement was made to the effect, and I'm just going from memory here, to the effect that these sorts of adventures out into taking on sponsoring community projects all over Jamaica, community, that whole list of donations to a wide variety of sectors, was a policy statement made to the effect that that would have been curtailed at any time? I seem to recall something along those lines, and I'm a bit surprised to hear that, another iteration is being contemplated after we've been through this, these weeks of seeing where, the money is not necessarily well spent.
There was a policy statement. In fact, the ministry has the donation sponsorship policy of PCJ under review at this moment. I've just received the evaluation that was done by the policy division of the ministry, and I will be sending that feedback to PCJ, and Mr. Richardson is here advising me that this is an initiative that was initiated by the board of PCJ, and they have it under consideration. So this particular initiative that's about to be launched, I would dare say, has not yet been presented to the ministry.
P.S., just to make the point that I think it works out as roughly last year $160,000 per participant was the cost to do this 3-month program. And I think it's worth reading paragraph 719 of this case study on page 90. PCJ indicated that members of Parliament were contacted to submit names of persons to participate in the program. However, evidence was not provided to aid our assessment of the recruitment and selection process and aid our determination of whether participants were selected under a transparent and equitable basis. So, I don't know which MPs in here received that invitation to submit any. I don't recall getting one, I must tell you. PCJ also expended approximately another $9.5 million out of the projected $25 million to be paid in stipend for those who attended courses under the program. So that was on top of this. So that number per student would go up.
Okay, Chairman, I will have to take advice on this matter. I am not aware
Yes. Okay.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
1 second before you, Member Phillips and then Member Warrington.
I just want to ask the PCJ directly, though, if they felt that they got value for money out of this first program that was executed.
Yes, sir, we did. On the face of it, we did.
Yeah.
We reached out to as many, I think the ministry reached out to as many persons as they could, and we got persons coming back on the program. And we also did a follow-up whereby we created an app and sent it out to the students that we had contact information on, just for them to provide us with updates
Yeah,
on
but
it.
what evaluation did you do to say that you got value for money? I mean,
Well,
you say yes, you did. So,
Let me
what
probably
evaluation?
turn this over to,
that you accomplished what it is that you had set out to.
I'll ask the head of HR just to comment on that a second.
All right, thank you. Good morning, members.
Just identify yourself, please, ma'am, for the record.
My name is Karen Elliott, and I'm representing from the PCJ HR. A member of the committee which subsequently undertook coordination or aspect of this program. When the program concluded, we did a survey to a contingent of the individuals who participated just to get their feedback, their impact the program had, because as was indicated, we targeted underserved youth within the communities within Jamaica that needed a second chance at tertiary level education. And the feedback that we got was very positive, indicating that it shaped their lives. For many, they did not anticipate receiving this exposure to university life. Many of them, they graduated, they got a certificate, and they were able to even recommend the program to other individuals because of the impact it had on them. So we are currently still doing our assessment of the program because there were challenges, member, and those challenges were taken into consideration when we conceptualized the current program under consideration.
You will get persons wanting to go to the program because you're giving a stipend also, which is usually a draw card for some of these youths. But how many of them, and when I said evaluation, how many of them would have gone on to further their studies? How many of them, because you set out a target here of introducing engineering, information technology, and exposing them to these things, exposing them to participate to tertiary institution studies. So, how many of them would have gone on to want to study in these areas, apply for tertiary institutions without seeing that every year they come back to the same program? That is the evaluation that I want to know. Was done, have you achieved out of that?
Thank you, member.
And I would love to know also, it would be interesting because as one member of parliament, I didn't get any letter to suggest any persons to this program. I don't remember getting a letter. It would be interesting to know where the areas that they were recruited from.
Well, responding to the latter first, we do have, as part of the consideration, a letter that was presented to us. It was addressed to all members of parliament, and this was in early March. That can be available for your view. But in terms of the closeout, one of the things we're currently undertaking, which is why we have not yet even produced our final report from PCJ, the very thing that you're asking about, member, we are currently making contact with the individuals to determine how it is that they were able to either get jobs or even from an entrepreneurial standpoint, whether they were able to be assisted. And so that is currently being undertaken. It is taking some time because, as you know, administratively, UTEC was a part of the administration. They're no longer part of it. So it's all on PCJ. So we are having challenges in some instance getting through to some of the individuals. But as I said, we are currently doing it, and we have a closeout target date of the end of this month to be able to have that impact report available.
So for clarity, you're saying UTEC is no longer a part of?
Well, UTEC delivered.
Which was?
They have delivered, meaning what they were engaged to do, they trained the individuals. There was a graduation ceremony, so in terms of administrative work, it's on the PCJ now. Member also wanted to indicate, I think there are 1 or 2 individuals from the program who also applied to UTEC and was accepted into a program there.
Could we get a copy of that letter to MPs? So I want to see if I recall it. So if you could...
Sure, it's available, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If you could just let the clerk have it so we can have copies for the members.
Well, I mean, so what you're saying to me is that you can't say it has been a success yet. Because, I mean, apart from having hundreds of students go to a summer camp, and but the evaluation to say that it is a success for spending close to $100 million can't be determined as yet.
We wanted to ensure, member, that in going forward and ensuring that we put something similar on the table, that all corners were assessed. And I'm saying that the assessment has begun, member, but it's not yet completed. And so we are currently undertaking other aspects to include. We have done the survey. We have gotten the final report from UTEC to indicate the persons that successfully completed the program, they were trained, they got their certificates, and I'm saying that there are other aspects of the program that we're assessing, which includes, as you said, just to determine how many of these individuals currently are engaged in job or have taken on entrepreneurial pursuits.
Chairman.
Yes, well, 1 second. Mr. Warmington, and I think then Mr. Clark, then Dr. Guy.
Yeah, we're right. Mr. Chairman, the report said that 83.8 million was paid, and at the time of the report there was an invoice for 35.9 million. Was that 35.9 paid?
Member, no, it hasn't been settled just yet.
Come again?
It hasn't been settled with UTEC just yet.
That been settled?
Hasn't been settled just yet.
What is holding up that settlement?
Pardon?
What is preventing the payments? That's what you're saying.
We're having some additional discussions with UTEC.
All right, because, so you'd hope to pay that amount? Or you deduct from that? I want to know. Even this, they claim the 83.8 and 35.9 would come to 19.7 instead of 119.7 instead of 190.6. So it's even above the contract amount. Okay? But what I want to know, in that you fell 94 participants short of the whole program, would you pay the full amount? That's what I want to know. Why you said it may settle. So would you be paying the full amount when, how would you deal with the 94 short? You're short of 94 participants. The report said it said it was 562 and you said 656. So it's still 94 short of the 750 who were supposed to have been trained. That's all? Yeah. So what I'm asking, how do you deal with the 94 short?
And that's why we're having the discussions currently.
To see if you can deduct that from it?
I wouldn't say deduct, but we're going through some discussions with you.
Yeah, discussion, but you don't answer my question.
No, but we haven't settled on a position. We haven't settled on a position.
Hold on. You're confusing issue. You don't settle on a position. If you have a contract for 750 students or participants, at 119.6 million. They're billing for 90.7 million. And you say you don't have a position. If the contract was not fully fulfilled, it is simpler to deduct for the 94. So why would you have discussion on that? It's a simple thing I'm asking. It's a simple question. You asked for them to train 750 people. They train 97 short. So it's simple to go and deduct for 94. It's as simple as that. So why do we have discussions on it and you say we don't finalize? And the simple thing you ought to say, we won't pay for 94 that were not included. It's simple as that, you know. Otherwise you throw taxpayers' money.
Understood, member. We have a contract and we're looking through it and we're going to have a settlement.
But you take a long time
to look that we can take, then we will take.
But you take a very long time to look through this contract. Look how long this report was done. You take a very long time. It's a simple stuff. They didn't train 750. Let's raise 656. So you pay for 656. As simple thing as that. It's a simple arithmetic or simple common sense.
I mean, that's assuming it's the 119.6 million was on a per head basis. You know, yeah. If it's on a per head basis, you could prorate it, but one would have to look and see.
Right,
as,
and that's
as
why
member
we're
says,
reviewing
it's
the
taking
contract.
rather a long time.
I don't believe the contract lists a per head basis.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask one question, as Member Clark, but you are ahead of me, and so is Dr. Guy. Go ahead, man.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I heard Member Phillips ask a question. What is the number of persons that have moved on from this summer program into tertiary education, Mr. Chairman? But as a member of this committee and a member who has the responsibility or somewhat of a task each summer to get the bombarding argument from youngsters, can you find me a summer job to help me with my tuition going back into school September? The bigger picture of it, Mr. Chairman, is not really how many students matriculate or move on to tertiary, but the fact that this program is providing summer job for that amount of youngsters from all over the country, inner cities. That is what we should really pay attention to and laud the program for, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, the question really is value for money, you know, and this 160,000 ahead is quite high. Dr. Guy.
Chairman, I was one of those members of parliament who got a letter last year. The funny thing about the letter, though, and it brought back the memories then, was that the letter was type dated on May the 27th, March the 27th, a Tuesday. So we would have gotten it in Parliament the following Tuesday, and that this would have to be, the names would have to be submitted back to PCJ by March the 30th of the same year, which is 3 days after the letter would have been type dated. Now, the reason why I didn't send any persons was because of this particular time date, because I would have received it after, not I would have. I received it after the date had passed to submit the members. So obviously, whoever knew before had sent in persons. Secondly, I knew that constituents from mine had been part of the program. I was not aware how they heard, but what I know is that some found it difficult to attend because the stipend that was being paid could not treat with the traveling expenses that accorded coming to Kingston to be part of this particular program. So some of them started and dropped out. Now the question I want to ask is if the purpose of the program, as is outlined in the AG's report here, exposure, pre-university training course to include training, etc., 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 towards exposing participants to tertiary education studies. Was the intention of the program to encourage these students who needed a second opportunity, as was expressed, to not only exposure to tertiary education, but one would think that you would want them to be part of the tertiary training program. Question is, and a proper assessment as to whether this program was effective, is how many students who participated in this program would have applied to university or any tertiary institution post this pre-university exposure, and to see whether there was some success there.
That was Member Phillips' one of his points, I think, but I don't think they have that data at this point.
No, not at the moment.
Could I ask, the program that you're looking at, subject to board approval for this year, what is the target number of students and what is the budget that you have proposed to your board for this year?
It's about 100 that we're targeting for this year. 100 students.
100 students, that's significantly less.
Yes.
Yeah. Why have you scaled it down so dramatically?
Coming out of the reports, we recognized that there were some teething pains, and so, like I said, we had to evolve the program to ensure that we could match what we can actually achieve with the resources that we do have. And so with 100, I think it's more manageable. We can actually track what happens with each student and allow us to then identify clear metrics prior and then follow up with those metrics to see if we achieve them or not.
And is it going to be housed at UTech again?
Yes, it will be.
And what is the contract cost that they've proposed for this one?
I think it's about 30 million in total. 29, just under 30.
Any other questions, members, on this? If not, okay. As we've completed the prompt, at this point, I don't know if there are any other issues that any members want to raise, and if so, they can raise them now, and then after that we can discuss what we do next. Mr. Member Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A representative from Petrojam, I think, spoke earlier about the working capital and the significant improvement in your cash flow position. Is that correct?
That's correct, member.
So the question is, with regards to the VDU, which seemed to be a very critical component for Petrojam going forward, has there been any consideration in investing in that VDU?
We haven't taken a decision on that yet because a couple of events. First of all, we need board approval. With all the transition taking place, we haven't sorted out that part of it yet. Secondly, there was a report to be done by Mr. Zaka and his committee. So we're waiting on that as well. So pretty much everything is on hold pending the outcome of what that report says.
Member Bunting? Or you have a follow?
Follow-up to that question, but with regards to the program for the university that was mentioned earlier, I mean, you have scaled down from 750 to 100. The intended purpose of the program before, I know you say I've gotten a report and there's a number of teething pains or issues relating to that report. But if you just go back to the original intent of the program, would 100 students now match that original intention?
The cost per student is going up from 160,000 to 300,000 under the scale down program. So presumably it's a more nourishing program for a much smaller number of students. Yeah.
So ultimately, I'll start off and I'll go over to Camille Taylor just to fill in anything that I've missed. When the PCJ looked back at it, what we recognized is if we targeted students within our high schools, particularly those that participate in our school's energy program, that showed a clear interest in wanting to further their education, we could give a more focused program, and that's partly why the cost has gone up. It's clear university credits, it's pre-university credits, so it would be bankable basically at the UTech, and students who want to then apply later on will have some reduction in amount of credits that they have to get at some future point. The program
Chairman,
before, the program before wasn't giving you university credits, it was giving you an understanding of what you do in the university environment and how to operate in that.
But then,
and it was a residential program last.
It was a residential.
Yeah.
But then earlier, Chairman, I mean, you said that there was no track and trace studies ever done to know who was interested in matriculating from the program into a university. So how can you just now come and make that decision?
Member Bunting?
Well, it's not just going and making a decision. It's looking at the program holistically, identifying where we saw gaps and looking at how we could best turn it into a program that we could then have a clear way of ensuring that what we want to achieve, we see it achieved at the end of the program. And it will evolve. It will evolve. It will evolve.
Just don't let one position when they have one big.
Yeah, each MP will get 1 point something students, 1.5 students. Mr. Chairman, the report of the ZACA Commission should be, having seen the terms of reference myself originally, or the draft terms of reference, many of the issues overlap with what we've been treating with over the last 6 months on this committee. And while as a group or a subgroup of parliamentarians we're very seized with the issues now, I almost feel like an expert on Petrojam. I was wondering if the PS could say if we could see a copy of this report while we're still sitting on treating with the Auditor General's report, because I think it would be very helpful for us to comment on that. But that's the first question. Second question, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask if we're going to give as a committee, as a public accounts committee, whether we're going to submit a report, our report on the review of Petrojam, which has actually, although the prompts and the AG's report has guided us, or have guided us, but we've gone beyond the scope of just looking at the AG's report. And I was wondering if you, as chairman, was thinking that we would do a report from this committee back to the parliament.
I've actually discussed that with the clerk this morning. I mean, given the amount of time we've spent on this topic and how extensive the range of issues that were covered in the AG's report and that we've delved into, I think we owe it to Parliament to give a report of what we've done. So I've asked the clerk, or mentioned the clerk, and she, I think, agreed that would be appropriate given the length of time. So yes is the answer to that. In terms of the ZACA report, PS, is that a report that could be shared with the PAC or not?
The ZACA report is not yet available, Chairman. It is under consideration by the Cabinet. I have no authority to release the report at this time.
Do you anticipate that authority may be forthcoming, or there's been no discussion of that?
I can't preempt the views of Cabinet. I know, though, that there are some next steps which we are required to take next week. So,
yes, Member Jackson.
Two things, Chair. Just to mention that the report from the PAC to Parliament is a requirement, because the committees act on behalf of the full House. So we are obliged to submit a report on our review of the Auditor General report, which will be then debated in the full House. I was absent a couple sittings on the committee, and I wanted to yes, the report will, but I don't want the item of the counseling services at Petrojam. Right? I don't know if it was deliberated in my absence, but I was particularly concerned about, one, it was a shift in Petrojam from what usually obtained. And we had an expenditure of over $14 million. My question is, why Petrojam shifted from the in-house counseling services to contract somebody externally?
Are you looking at, what page are you looking at?
Yes, it is 6, item 6 in the report.
What page?
75.
Thank you.
The short answer, member, is that it was a shift. I don't know why we shifted from what we normally do.
Okay.
I don't know why they shifted to getting an individual.
In much the same way that the internship program has been reviewed or continue to be reviewed and modifications made. What presently obtains now for your counseling services?
We engage Family Life Ministries, and we were using them before, and then there was a shift where we went to an individual. We have gone back to that.
But again, in the same breath that you were assessing value for money in the expenditure made, can you say there was value for money in that shift that was made?
I didn't see it, so I terminated the counselor when I went there.
Okay. Can you say if the counselor engaged had the requisite competence to provide that service? Counseling is a professional work.
I can't say. I didn't see anything to give me that comfort.
Yes, Member Flynn.
Yes, I just wanted to get back to the report. I just need some clarification because I've been on other committees and I'm not sure that we've ever, given a report. What I want to know is the AG did a report and we asked questions, and those questions I think were answered by giving us a whole heap of paper there with the questions that we were asking. I want to know the report that we're going to be submitting, is that from us, the committee members?
Yes, it is. You remember?
So that'll be different from what we'd asked for and was given to us.
Yes, it is a brief report that is usually fairly brief. The PAAC have been doing it from time to time, and the chairman in the House in plenary session will table a report, and it can be debated if the House wants to debate it. So it is a formal requirement of committees to do this. And it's not always done, but since we spent so much time on this particular matter, I think we should do it. Any other questions, members? If not, we can move to any other business. And there being no other business, I would suggest we don't set the date of the next meeting today, because we have to decide what we're going to move to next, and the clerk has to confer with the Auditor General's department and so on to do that. And in terms of the report, I'm sure the clerk will produce, yes, whenever that will be done as soon as it's practicable to do it. Yes.
Mr.
Closing remarks from the Auditor General.
Yes, we should do that. But in terms of our next set of tasks as a committee, given the remit of the PAC, I want to suggest that we look at the committee deal with transactions by government, the PAC, the beach property in St. Anne. Right? I think that is a matter that the PAC should give consideration to.
The General done a report on that?
There's a report from the Integrity Commission.
Rooms UDC.
What are you talking about?
Or you have done UDC.
I think maybe that should be taken up by the PAAC, given that our remit is to review Auditor General reports. AG, I don't know if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make as we wrap up this particular exercise. I will afford you that opportunity. It can be.
Thanks for inviting my remarks, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much to say. I think we've had a very intense discussion here over the last 6 months. The aim of the AG's report, I always reiterate, is to inspire change in government to ensure that there is better value to be achieved from the scarce resources that we have. I am pleased with the level of discussion around the report. I think it augurs well for other agencies, and it is always my encouragement to other agencies to view a report of the Auditor General on another organization as being relevant to them and not await an audit to commence making changes, but to assess their own governance processes. I do not believe that the situation at Petrojam is actually unique and should have been seen with any level of alarm. The Auditor General's Department over the years have reported governance issues. Those governance weaknesses take on a different form and nature based on the industry or the organization that you're working with. So the aim here, and I certainly hope that the recommendations made in that report will actually be considered and be implemented, not solely within Petrojam, but to the wider public sector.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, just on a side, in the media about the CMU and the issue of agencies not being able, and I understand that your agency is one also that has requested documentation. Have you been able to, I heard the lawyer for CMU on the radio yesterday stating that they have handed over those documents. Have you been able to receive the documentations from CMU to complete your audit?
Mr. Chairman, through the chairman, you know that I'm generally very discreet when audits are in progress. So I do not want to comment on that at this point in time. I am not aware of any information that was provided yesterday, so certainly I'll be coming from an uninformed position. But suffice to say that there are provisions under the law that allows an Auditor General to actually demand information if it is that that information is not being provided. But I've not had any situation that I think at this point in time I need to be alarmed about or feel that we will not achieve the objective of the audit.
All right, thank you.
Can I, just a clarification. Just said she has the power to demand information. If the entity refuses or is reluctant to, what authority do you have to?
I can't recall the specific provision, but under the FAA Act, I think it's Section 28. Yes. Well, under Section 25, all agencies are required to comply with the request of an Auditor General for whatever information is needed in pursuit of an audit. Failure to provide that can result in a report in the first instance to the Ministry of Finance. And I know that there is some action that can be taken subsequently, but I don't want to quote the specific.
Have you ever had to go to that extent?
I have used that provision in the past.
Have you in the past experienced any entity engage in legal counsel in respect to requests that you make for any documents?
Yes, I have in the past. And that particular entity requested an opinion. Well, they first sought an opinion from the Solicitor General, seeking to determine whether it would be appropriate to provide the information that they thought I requested. Right, and the Attorney General provided an opinion that I also use as a basis going forward. No, never before.
Having to go to court for an order?
No, absolutely not. I've never had
And that legal counsel that you refer to is the Solicitor General Chamber?
Yes.
Which is the government's lawyer?
Yes.
And not external lawyer?
Not to me.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So, members, I just think at this point we should thank all of those who have been coming here week after week for the time that they've put in. I want to thank the team at Petroleum and PCJ for their responsiveness to questions that have been asked and the information that they provided in voluminously. This is only one of several files that we have generated. And if you have any proposals as to how we can deal with this voluminous paper, I'd be anxious to, or happy to receive that. Yeah, yes.
Just one directed to Petrojam. And as you extend appreciation for the staff for coming here.
Are you thanking them?
Yes, I'm thanking them.
On
And I'm
behalf of us?
on behalf of us, and I'm going further. I would like to know, Mr. Watson and your fellow, what is the atmosphere amongst the workers at Petrojam? I heard some report of some disquiet, and have you been having any recent separation or any such?
Stop fishing.
Yeah. Let's just end this and just thank them for being here all.
Mr. Chairman, can you give me some protection from these two members here?
Yes, just Mr. Watson, you may respond to that. And
I have not heard of any disquiet. We have not had any separation as you are talking about. You mean people resigning to leave? Well, we haven't had anything like that.
Jolly staff.
But no, I'm not finished yet.
Oh.
But the staff is quite demoralized. I mean, this thing is in the paper, we're in the news weekly. So we're going through an exercise of hopefully building back the trust and building back the morale.
Is it the case that that demoralization that you mentioned of, was it of great heights during the last 2 or so years?
You know pretty well.
I wasn't there, so I don't know if I could speak to it then. But when I went back, you could see a level of demoralization.
Worse than you saw it when you left?
yeah, without a doubt. Madam PS?
Chairman, let me just say, shortly after assuming office, the minister and I went to Petrojam for a staff meeting. The staff has been severely affected by this process. Members of staff came to us after the meeting individually to express how it has affected them on a very personal level, on their family level. Minister said in the sectoral presentation they have stopped wearing the company's shirts because of the level of abuse they would be exposed to in the public space. One parent said to me, one worker said to me, her child says, "What you doing with Petrojam pen? Carry back them something, next thing them say, oh, your teeth in it." So this is the level of demoralization that the staff of the entity has been subject to over this long period of time. And yes, I have no objection to us examining our entities as we ought. But then, you know, the process and the how and how we try to contain it to minimize the effect on persons, because staff, you know, they are saying, we were not responsible for this. We didn't take the decisions. We didn't this and we didn't do the other thing. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done with the staff of Petrojam going forward as they try to rebuild their image. Personally, I was asked a couple of weeks, I think maybe the same weekend after I was assigned, I went to a funeral and I was being asked, also now you're in the Petrojam ministry, we can get job and get money. So, you know, there was an image that has been created of this entity. So, you know, while we examine issues, we need to be careful of the implications of what happens. And you know, all of this mopping up as we do the corrective action and seek to mitigate the negatives that have been created or have occurred in this process. we have to now build back lives. That's really what it is.
Yes, thank you, PS. And I want to thank you for your role in this since you came on board, and how your efforts to ensure that we get information, on a timely basis. It's much appreciated.
Yeah,
of course, we sympathize with the staff who have gone through this process. I mean, it is really as a result of the uncovering of a level of impropriety, cronyism, nepotism, and outright corruption, which is unprecedented as far as I'm concerned during my time in public life. And I think the committee had an obligation and a duty to take this report extremely seriously and to go into it in great detail. And I think it has taken us 6 months to complete the process so far. And I just want to thank everybody for having done so. I don't think that we have in any way gone overboard.
If you just allow me to associate myself with your remarks, because, as I said earlier, many of the persons who remain now, the professionals at Petrojam, are the ones who documented the objections and did so courageously, notwithstanding board and previous management trying to carry them down a particular way or successfully carrying them down the wrong road, but at least they documented it diligently, and it showed that they were standing up for the long-term health of the organization and for good governance. And having been the only one of the committee who actually participated, visited, and went to the pricing committee, I had an opportunity to see in the administration building a large picture of Mr. Hewitt and his good wife, who were both 35-year veterans. This was the recognition that they were giving. 35-year veterans of Petrojam. And I can just imagine how emotionally connected and invested they must be, not just professionally, but emotionally, having been there for all that time. So, I am sorry that these professionals have had to go through this, but it is not the fault of either the Auditor General or the PAC. It's the fault of those rogues who carried it down the wrong road. And I think I just wanted to associate myself with acknowledging the professionals, because I would never want it to be believed by the public that they were not good, honest, courageous professionals who worked there, who objected and must have been very cut up to see the direction that the organization was taking in.
All right, thank you, member. Member, would anyone move for the adjournment? Thank you, Member Flint. Yeah. Thank you, members. Meeting stands adjourned.
Move the earth to please, but I always acknowledge and know that the earth can move as it pleases. Poor building techniques, poor materials, and shoddy workmanship lead to disasters. Earthquakes don't kill people, disasters do. And we should make sure that we don't contribute to it by building poor buildings. Build right, build smart.
To learn more, log on to